a retired Navy SEAL, and his loyal dog were heading to a small cabin he had just bought for $20. But the moment they arrived, his German shepherd reacted violently and ran straight into the house. When the SEAL followed him into the kitchen, he found a young woman pointing a kitchen knife at him, whispering, "Don't come any closer." He slowly pulled out an old medal and an expired military ID, telling her he was a former soldier who had just bought the cabin and had no idea she was there. Then his dog lay down on the kitchen floor, resting his head on his paws while still watching Lila, and that single gesture made her lower the knife. Lila finally confessed that her parents, Noah and Celeste Caro, had died in a fire at Everett Lawn's relief warehouse, and afterward Everett blamed them for the disaster and demanded her family's land as payment. She had tried to go to the police, but the townspeople defended Everett because he had helped them for years, so Lila took the land papers and ran. Where are you watching from? Leave your thoughts below, and please like and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, faith, and courage. Larchmere Falls looked innocent from the highway. That was the first thing Brennan Vale noticed as his old navy blue pickup rolled past the town sign, tires crunching over a thin crust of snow. The place sat in northern Maine like a candle in a glass jar, bright enough to comfort a stranger, small enough to hide its shadows. White snow rested on steep wooden roofs. Dark pines leaned over the road like old witnesses. Shop windows glowed gold in the late afternoon, and paper snowflakes had been taped inside the bakery glass for the coming winter hearth festival. From a distance, it looked like the kind of town where no one locked their doors. Brennan had lived long enough to know better. He drove with both hands on the wheel, shoulders broad beneath a faded tan military jacket, his brown-grey sweater visible at the collar. At 58, he still carried the hard, quiet build of a man shaped by service rather than comfort. His hair was dark brown, short and wind-tossed on top, silver at the temples. A trimmed beard shadowed his square jaw. His grey-blue eyes did not move quickly, but they missed very little. In the passenger seat, Atlas watched the town pass. The German shepherd was 9 years old, large and steady, with a black saddle across his back and warm tan-gold fur along his chest and legs. His muzzle had begun to silver, and a small tear marked the edge of his right ear. There was a white streak on his left chest, shaped like a broken bolt of lightning, visible whenever he turned toward the light. He had once served beside Brennan in places where snow would have been a mercy. Now he rode silently, amber eyes calm, old leather collar resting against his thick neck. "You see it too, huh?" Brennan murmured. Atlas did not answer, of course, but one ear shifted. That was answer enough. The cabin waited 3 miles beyond town, past the last plowed road, and a narrow lane Brennan had to clear himself with the truck's front blade. The county had called it a winter restoration property. The listing had called it remote, structurally compromised, historically significant. The clerk had called it a headache with a roof. The transfer fee was $20. That was not the price of the cabin. Brennan understood that. $20 only bought the right to inherit everything wrong with it. Back taxes, a roof with soft corners, frozen plumbing, a road that vanished under snow, and a county contract requiring repair within 12 months. No sane family wanted it. No young couple wanted to raise children that far from town. No investor wanted a property where the nearest neighbor was more likely to be a moose than a man with cash. Brennan wanted it because no one else did. Silence had become expensive in his life. Here, it cost $20 and a long list of problems. The cabin stood at the edge of a spruce forest, low and weathered, with a sagging porch and a chimney dark from old winters. Snow gathered along the steps. A frozen creek ran somewhere beyond the trees, hidden but faintly speaking under its skin of ice. There was no smoke from the chimney, no tire tracks in the yard, No sign of anyone living there. Still, Atlas went still before Brennan even turned off the engine. The dog's head lifted, his body tightened. Not fear, not excitement. Something older than either. Brennan's hand paused on the key. He had seen Atlas like that before. Outside rooms that held tripwires, vehicles that carried things men lied about, alleys where the air itself seemed to be holding its breath. Empty houses did not make Atlas freeze. Brennan cut the engine. The quiet came down hard. Wind dragged loose snow across the yard in thin, whispering sheets. The pines creaked softly, their branches heavy with white. Brennan opened his door and stepped out, boots sinking into the crust. Atlas jumped down beside him, but instead of circling the property, he fixed his gaze on the back door. "Easy," Brennan said. Atlas moved anyway, not running wildly, not barking. He advanced with purpose, head low, shoulders rolling under his winter-thick coat. Brennan followed, one hand near his side but not reaching for anything yet. Old habits rose in him like wolves from a tree line. Count the windows, watch the corners. Listen before entering. Breathe low. Move slower than fear. The back door was unlocked. That bothered him more than if it had been broken. Brennan pushed it open. Cold air breathed out of the cabin. Dust, old pine boards, dead ashes in a stove. The room beyond was dim, with covered furniture and a table pushed near the wall. Atlas slipped inside first, paws soundless on the floorboards. Brennan stepped in after him. The cabin should have felt abandoned. It did not. Atlas moved through the main room and stopped at the entrance to the kitchen. His ears stood high. A low growl gathered in his throat, controlled and deep. Brennan did not speak. He angled himself beside the doorway and looked in. At first, he saw only the kitchen. Cracked white cabinets, a cast iron stove, a sink with a rust stain like dried blood beneath the tap. Then something shifted behind the lower cupboards. A young woman crouched there, half hidden in shadow. She had a kitchen knife in her hand. Her face was pale, her chestnut-brown hair tangled around her cheeks. Her green eyes wide with the kind of terror that had already imagined the worst, and was ready to meet it standing. She wore a dark denim jacket over a cream sweater, black jeans dusted with snow at the knees, and boots that looked too thin for the weather. A moss-green scarf was wrapped tight at her throat, one end clutched in her fist beneath the knife. "Stay back," she said. Her voice shook, but the knife did not. Brennan stopped at once. Atlas did not lunge. He stood between Brennan and the girl, not threatening her, not leaving her either. "I'm not here to hurt you," Brennan said. "That's what they said." "Who?" Her jaw tightened. The knife lifted another inch. Brennan saw it then, not madness, not aggression. A cornered soul. A frightened person who had spent too many hours learning that doors only opened to let danger in. He slowly placed both hands on the edge of the kitchen table. "My name is Brennan Vale. I bought this cabin from the county this morning." The girl's eyes flicked toward the doorway, then back to him. "No, Everett sent you." "I don't know Everett. Everyone knows Everett." The bitterness in that sentence was young, but the wound beneath it was not. Brennan moved carefully, reaching with 2 fingers into the inside pocket of his faded jacket. The girl stiffened. "Slow," he said. "I'm only taking out identification." He withdrew an old military ID and a small service medal he kept wrapped in worn cloth. He placed both on the table and slid them no farther. "I was Navy," he said. "Long time ago. This is Atlas. He won't hurt you unless you make him." Atlas chose that moment to do something Brennan had not commanded. The old German shepherd lowered himself to the kitchen floor, stretched out his front legs, and rested his chin between his paws. His amber eyes stayed on the girl, but his body spoke a language older than words. "I am not here to take anything from you." The girl stared at him. For several seconds, the only sound in the cabin was wind pressing against the windows. Then her grip changed. The knife dipped. Not all the way. But enough? "What's your name?" Brennan asked. She swallowed. "Lila, what?" A long pause. "Caro." Something in the name stirred at the edge of Brennan's memory. Not from his own life, but from the county paperwork. The cabin had once belonged to Elias Morrow, an old carpenter. The clerk had mentioned Morrow had been close to a local family years ago. Brennan had not cared enough then to ask which family. Now he cared. Lila looked past him toward the room, as if expecting another man to step out of the shadows. "I thought this place was still empty," she said. "My father brought me here when I was little. He said if I ever needed somewhere quiet, old Elias's cabin was too stubborn to fall down." "Your father?" "Noah Caro." The name landed heavier than it should have. Brennan kept his voice even. "What happened to him?" Lila's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. "He and my mother died in the fire at Lawn Winter Relief." Brennan had seen a headline taped to the county office window that morning. "Warehouse fire. Relief supplies lost. Local tragedy." 2 workers blamed for the accident. He had read only enough to know the town was grieving. Now grief sat on the kitchen floor in front of him with a knife in its hand. "They said my parents caused it," Lila continued. "They said Dad mishandled equipment. They said Mom ignored safety rules. Everett told everyone they ruined the winter relief stock." Her mouth twisted around the next words. "Then his lawyer came before the funeral flowers were dead and told me my family owed damages. He wanted our land." Atlas lifted his head slightly. Brennan noticed. Lila noticed, too. She pressed the knife against her own knee, not threatening now, just holding on to the last thing that made her feel less helpless. "I tried to talk to people," she said. "The sheriff's office, the church board, anyone. But Everett feeds half this town in winter. He gives blankets to widows and heaters to veterans. People looked at me like I was spitting on a saint. And you ran. I took the papers and ran before they could make me sign anything." "Papers?" Lila hesitated. Then she reached into a cloth satchel beside her and pulled out an old tin box. It was small, dented, blue paint worn to dull grey at the corners. The kind of box a woman might keep sewing needles in, or recipes, or letters from a life before everything burned. "My father sent this to me the day before the fire," she said. Brennan did not reach for it. Lila opened it herself. Inside were folded land documents, a few torn pieces of shipping labels, and a small key marked with 3 scratched characters, C3. Beneath them lay a note written in a hurried hand. Lila unfolded it and placed it on the table. Brennan read the words once, then again. "Lila, don't sign anything from Everett. If we don't come back, look beneath the floor of cold storage room 3. Your mother hid what scares him." The cabin seemed to grow quieter around the note. Brennan had read last words before, some written in blood, some in dust, some in voices over radios that never transmitted again. This was different. This was not a farewell from a man who knew death was coming. It was a father building one last bridge in the dark, hoping his daughter would find it before the wolves did. Atlas rose. He stepped toward the tin box. "Atlas," Brennan warned softly, but the dog did not touch it. He lowered his nose to the rim and inhaled. A tremor went through his shoulders. Then he gave a low growl, stepped back half a pace, and looked directly at Brennan. No bark, no panic, only recognition. Brennan felt the old world open behind his ribs. There were smells Atlas ignored: fear sweat, old food, damp wood, smoke from 100 harmless stoves. And there were smells he did not ignore. Traces that clung to metal and cloth. Things moved in secret. Things hidden under names that did not belong to them. Lila looked between them. "What is it?" she whispered. Brennan picked up one torn shipping label without touching the rest of the contents. The printed words were innocent enough. "Winter Blankets, Senior Outreach. Lawn Winter Relief." He set the label down. Atlas kept staring at him. Brennan looked at the girl, at the knife now lowered to her side. At the tin box her father had sent through the last clear hour before fire took everything. Outside, snow kept falling softly, trying its best to make the world look clean. But some things did not become clean just because they were covered. Brennan's voice was low when he spoke. "You're not running from a lawsuit, Lila." Her lips parted, but no words came. He looked once more at the key marked C3. "You're running from whatever killed your parents." Brennan Vale did not ask Lila Caro to leave. He could have. The cabin was his now, at least on paper. The county stamp said so, and the key in his pocket said so, though the roof still sagged like an old man with bad knees, and the pipes had likely frozen before Thanksgiving. A practical man would have called the sheriff, reported a trespasser, and kept his $20 problems simple. But Brennan had learned a long time ago that simple was often just another word for unfinished. So he shut the back door against the wind, slid the kitchen knife farther across the table, and said, "You can sit near the stove." Lila did not move at first. She stood where the fear had left her. Thin shoulders tense under her dark denim jacket, one hand still curled around the edge of her moss-green scarf. Her eyes kept moving from Brennan to Atlas to the windows, as if the glass itself might betray her. Only when Atlas stepped aside and lowered his head did she cross the room. The old German shepherd took the space between her and the door, not blocking her in, not letting the outside world rush in either. His black and gold coat caught the firelight when Brennan coaxed a flame from the stove. The white broken bolt marking on his chest flashed once before he settled to the floor. "Coffee?" Brennan asked. Lila gave a tired, broken laugh that held no humor. "I don't think I've slept enough for coffee to help. That makes two of us." He found an old kettle in one cabinet, rinsed it twice, and used bottled water from his truck. The cabin had come with mouse droppings, dead flies, and a stack of cracked plates, but no Mercy. Mercy had to be brought in by hand. Soon the room began to change. Fire licked at the stove. Frost softened on the window edges. The smell of damp wood gave way to coffee, smoke, and wool drying by heat. Outside, snow fell lightly over the pines, turning the forest into a quiet congregation. Lila sat at the table with both hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. Brennan sat across from her, not too close. He had removed his gloves, but not his coat. Men who had seen violence knew that sometimes safety was not a thing you announced. It was something you made slowly, with distance, lowered voices, and no sudden movements. "You," said Lawn Winter Relief, he said. Lila looked down at the tin box on the table. The dented lid was closed again, as though shutting it could keep the dead from speaking too loudly. "My parents worked there," she said. "Dad maintained the building and the trucks. Mom handled inventory. She knew every blanket, every heater, every crate of canned soup that came through that place." Brennan waited. Lila swallowed and continued. "Everett Lawn built his whole life around looking generous. Every winter, his trucks went out to the small towns north of here. Warm coats, food boxes, space heaters, medicine deliveries for seniors who couldn't drive. He called it Lawn Winter Relief." She looked toward the window, where snow gathered like silence on the sill. People loved him for it. Brennan had known men like that. Not exactly Everett, but the shape of him. Men who understood that a clean shirt could hide dirtier hands than any work glove. "What did he look like?" Brennan asked. Lila's mouth tightened. "Like someone who practiced being trusted in the mirror." She rubbed her thumb over the mug handle. "Tall enough to look important, not tall enough to seem threatening. Silver blonde hair always combed back. Smooth voice. Expensive coat. He'd put his hand on an old widow's shoulder and talk about dignity while photographers took pictures." She paused. "My mother used to say, Everett could make a lie sound like a hymn." The line landed softly, but it stayed in the room. Brennan leaned back. "And your parents found something." "At first, little things." Her voice steadied. as she entered the part of the story that had facts in it. Fear became easier when it had numbers, dates, weights, names. My dad noticed some of the trucks were coming back with more fuel used than the route required. He thought maybe drivers were taking detours. Then Mom noticed the inventory sheets didn't match what families received. How far off? Enough to matter. A senior home outside Ashford Bend was listed as receiving 12 portable heaters. They got 4. A veterans' shelter was supposed to receive winter blankets for 30 men. They got half that. Brennan's jaw moved once. Lila saw it and understood. There were some kinds of theft that did more than steal money. They stole warmth from people already near the cold edge of life. Mom started keeping copies, Lila said. Not full files, just enough to prove something was wrong. She wrote down truck numbers, dates, shipment weights, missing items. She wasn't trying to be some grand investigator. She was just angry. Angry? Lila nodded, and for the first time her expression softened into something like pride. My mother grew up poor. Not poetic poor, real poor. The kind where you wear socks on your hands when gloves cost too much. She knew what one missing heater could mean. The stove popped, sending a small flare of sparks behind the iron door. For a moment, Lila was not in Brennan's cabin. She was somewhere years before, seeing a woman with flour on her sleeves and winter in her bones, counting blankets because somebody had to count them. Celeste Caro, Lila said quietly, as if introducing her mother to the room. She was small, barely 5'3", with red-brown hair she kept tied back with whatever ribbon was closest. She had this soft face that made people underestimate her, but she could look at a crooked invoice and smell a lie before the ink dried. Brennan almost smiled. And your father? Noah was different, broad, quiet, always smelled like motor oil and pine shavings. Beard in winter, clean-shaven in summer, because Mum said he looked like a lost bear otherwise. He could fix anything with wire, patience, and one very bad word under his breath. This time, Brennan did smile faintly. Lila noticed and, against herself, did too. Then the smile disappeared. They found out about cold storage room 3. Brennan's eyes shifted to the key resting beside the tin box. C3. She nodded. On paper, it was for medical supplies, batteries, things that had to be kept stable. But Dad said the cooling system barely ran. He repaired it once. He knew. Still, Everett kept that room locked tighter than the office safe. Who had access? Everett. 2 drivers. Maybe 1 warehouse supervisor. Not my parents. Not officially. But Noah had a key. Dad made copies of half the building over the years because people always lost keys and called him in the middle of dinner. He wasn't supposed to keep that one. He did. The wind pressed against the cabin wall with a low moan. Atlas lifted his head, not alarmed, simply listening. Lila looked at him. Your dog understands more than most people. He understands what people forget to hide. That made her quiet. She reached into the tin box again, not for the note, but for one of the torn labels. She laid it flat with care. Brennan saw ordinary printed words, winter blankets, senior outreach, lawn winter relief. Then Lila turned it over. On the back, in faint pencil, were 3 initials and a date. Mom wrote that, Lila said. She didn't trust the digital records anymore. She started marking labels before they disappeared. Brennan studied the pencil marks. What do the initials mean? I don't know yet. She picked up another torn piece. This one had a thin red thread stuck beneath the corner of the adhesive. Lila's breath caught. Brennan saw her face change before she spoke. Not fear this time. Recognition. My mother sewed red thread into the corner of Real Relief blankets, she whispered. Why? So she could tell if Everett's men replaced them. The cabin fell still. Lila held the tiny red between her fingers like it was a relic from a saint no church had remembered to honor. It was such a small thing. Almost nothing. 1 piece of thread, bright as a drop of blood against a label meant to represent charity. But to Brennan, it changed the weight of the room. This was no longer only about missing supplies. Celeste Caro had known the donations were being switched. She had marked the honest goods so they could not vanish without leaving a wound behind. Lila closed her fist around the thread. She knew, she said. She knew before the fire. Brennan did not answer quickly. Some truths needed a moment to stand up. Finally, he said, that means she wasn't guessing. No. And your father sent you the key because they expected trouble. Lila's eyes darkened. They didn't expect to die. No, Brennan said. They expected to be stopped. That distinction mattered. He saw it settle into her. Her parents had not been prophets predicting their own deaths. They had been workers, parents, ordinary people who saw danger and tried to leave a trail for the one person they loved most. Lila wiped her cheek quickly, almost angrily. The next morning, the warehouse burned. Brennan let the silence take one breath before asking, what were they doing there? Everett said they were doing unauthorized work near a storage area. He said Dad mishandled equipment and Mom ignored safety rules. You believe that? My father once turned the truck around because he thought he smelled a loose fuel cap. Her voice sharpened. My mother unplugged the toaster every night, even if we hadn't used it. They were careful people. Careful people still died, Brennan knew. But careful people did not conveniently become reckless the moment their caution threatened a powerful man. Lila continued. Everett stood in front of the church and cried. He said the loss of supplies would hurt the poor most. He said, my parents had served the community for years, but one mistake could destroy a legacy. Her mouth trembled around the memory. Everyone forgave him for blaming them because he sounded sad while doing it. That was the cruelty of a polished liar, Brennan thought. He could stab a name and call the wound compassion. Did you go to law enforcement? He asked. I tried. Lila looked exhausted suddenly, older than 26. A deputy took my statement, but I didn't have proof yet. The fire report was still preliminary. Everett's lawyer sent me a warning letter the same day, saying if I accused him publicly, he'd sue me for defamation and damages. And the town? They believed him. He funds the volunteer fire department. He paid for repairs at the senior center. He donated heaters to the church basement last winter. Her voice dropped. When a man keeps people warm, they don't want to ask what he burns to do it. Brennan stared into his coffee. There it was. Not just crime. Worship. The kind communities built around anyone who provided comfort in a hard season. Everett had not merely hidden behind charity. He had taught people to defend the mask. Lila touched the key marked C3. I couldn't give this to anyone. If it got back to Everett before I knew what Mom hid, it would be gone. Maybe the only thing left of the truth would be gone. Brennan nodded once. He believed her, not because she was frightened. Fear could lie too. He believed her because the details did not rush. They arrived heavy, specific, reluctant. A father who smelled fuel caps. A mother who marked blankets with red thread. A key kept against rules. A town too grateful to ask the right questions. Atlas stood and walked to the window. Brennan looked over. The German shepherd did not growl. He only stared into the falling snow beyond the glass, his ears angled forward. Lila stiffened. Is someone out there? Brennan rose slowly and crossed to the window without turning on a light. He pulled the curtain aside just enough to see the yard. Nothing moved but snow, no headlights, no figure near the trees, no footprints he could see from this angle. Still, Atlas kept watching. Brennan let the curtain fall. Maybe wind, he said, but he did not believe in maybe. He returned to the table and closed the tin box gently, leaving the key out. Listen to me, he said. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we start with what can be verified. Lila looked at him as if kindness still sounded suspicious. You have a witness who delivered the box. You have labels your mother marked. You have a key. You have a pattern of missing relief supplies. None of that is enough alone. Together, maybe it starts becoming evidence. What if Everett finds me? Brennan glanced toward Atlas, who had settled again beside the door, old eyes bright in the stove glow. Then he finds out this cabin isn't empty anymore. Lila's shoulders lowered a fraction. Outside, winter kept falling, covering road, roof, and forest in white. Inside, on a scarred wooden table, a small key lay beside torn labels and one red thread. It did not look like much, but Brennan had seen wars turn on smaller things. He looked at Lila and spoke quietly, not as a promise, but as a plan. Fear kept you alive long enough to get here. Now we turn it into proof. Morning came blue and clean over Larchmere Falls. Snow had fallen through the night, not heavily, but with enough patience to soften the broken porch rail, cover the old tire tracks, and make Brennan Vale's $20 cabin look almost forgiven. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin grey ribbon. Inside, the stove had kept the room warm enough for sleep. Though Seela had not slept much, Brennan found her at the kitchen table before sunrise, both hands around the tin box, eyes fixed on the window. Atlas lay near the door, broad head lifted, amber eyes half open. The old German shepherd looked as if he had slept and kept watch at the same time, which was something Brennan had once envied. "We need a witness," Brennan said. Lila looked up. "Harold?" The man who delivered the box. Her fingers tightened around the tin. "He may not talk. Most people talk when silence starts costing too much." That sounded harsher than Brennan intended, but Lila did not flinch. She had begun to understand him a little. His kindness rarely arrived wrapped in soft cloth. It came like a handrail bolted into stone, plain, strong, meant to hold when the wind rose. They drove into town just after 8. Larchmere Falls had dressed itself for winter hearth. Fresh garlands hung from black lampposts. Warm yellow bulbs crossed Main Street from roof to roof. Children in bright hats dragged wooden sleds past the bakery, leaving 2 perfect lines behind them. The church bell tower stood above everything, white steeple piercing a pale winter sky. Volunteers were setting up folding tables in the square, stacking soup pots, donated mittens, knitted scarves, and cardboard boxes marked for seniors, veterans, and families without heat. It should have looked beautiful. To Brennan, it looked like a stage before the actors remembered their lines. Lila stepped down from the truck and pulled her moss-green scarf closer around her throat. The tin box stayed hidden in the cloth satchel under her coat. Atlas jumped down after her, his black and gold coat flashing in the clear light, the white broken bolt mark on his chest sharp against the snow. At first, only a few people noticed. Then the noticing spread. A woman carrying loaves of bread slowed. 2 men unloading firewood stopped talking. An elderly couple near the church steps looked at Lila, then away. No one shouted. No one accused her outright. That almost made it worse. Their silence had edges. Lila kept her chin up. Brennan saw the effort it cost her. Near the bakery door, a heavy-set woman with flour on her apron muttered, "After what happened at the warehouse, I wouldn't show my face." Lila heard it. Her eyes lowered for half a second. Brennan turned his head just enough for the woman to see his face. She suddenly found great interest in a basket of rolls. "Don't," Lila said softly. "I didn't say anything. Must be old age. Makes a man expressive." A small, unwilling breath escaped her. It was not a laugh, not quite, but it was less than a wound. They had only crossed half the square when the crowd changed again. Not with fear this time. With respect. A dark SUV rolled slowly along Main Street and stopped beside the church. The driver opened the rear door, and Everett Lawn stepped out into the winter light. He was 57, tall enough to command a room and polished enough to make that command look like service. His silver blonde hair was combed back neatly. His face was clean-shaven, handsome in a careful, public way. He wore a long charcoal wool coat, a cream scarf, dark gloves, and a small enamel pin shaped like the Lawn Winter Relief logo. His smile arrived before his eyes did. People turned toward him as if someone had brought warmth. Everett accepted that warmth like it belonged to him. He shook hands with a church volunteer, bent slightly to speak with an old man in a wheelchair, touched the shoulder of a young mother carrying a bundled baby. Every gesture looked natural, but Brennan saw the precision in it. The man knew where to stand, so others would gather around him. He knew how to make a crowd feel grateful before he even spoke. Then Everett saw Lila. The smile did not vanish. It softened. That was worse. "Leela," he said, crossing the square with practiced concern. "Thank God you're safe." Atlas moved before Brennan did. The German shepherd stepped in front of Lila, not lunging, not barking. He simply placed his body between her and Everett with the calm certainty of a locked gate. Everett stopped. For the first time, his timing failed by half a breath. "Beautiful dog," Everett said. Atlas stared at him. No growl, no teeth, only that still, ancient watchfulness that made some men feel suddenly remembered by their sins. Brennan stood beside Lila, mourning. Everett's eyes moved over him. The jacket, the boots, the posture. His smile adjusted. "You must be Mr. Vale. I heard someone had taken old Morrow's cabin. News travels. In a town this small, concern travels faster. That what this is?" Everett gave a soft sigh, as if Brennan had disappointed him, but not surprised him. "I'm concerned for Lila. She's grieving, confused, vulnerable to people who may not understand what this community has endured." Lila's face went pale with anger. Brennan felt her shift beside him, but he did not look away from Everett. "She says you want her land." Everett's expression did not change, but something cold passed behind his eyes. "I want a legal matter resolved without destroying what remains of her family name. That kind of mercy usually come with paperwork." A few people nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Everett lowered his voice, but not enough to lose the crowd. "Her parents' mistake cost this town dearly. Winter supplies were lost. Elderly residents went without. Veterans waited for heaters that never arrived. I have tried to carry that burden quietly." Lila's hands curled at her sides. Brennan spoke before she could. "If her parents' guilt is as clear as you say, why do you need her land before an independent review is finished?" The square changed, not loudly, not dramatically. But the air tightened. One volunteer looked down at the box of scarves in his hands. The bakery woman stopped whispering. Even the church bell, silent above them, seemed to be listening. Everett's smile remained, but it grew thinner. "You're new here, Mr. Vale. I've been new in worse places. Then perhaps you should learn before you accuse." "I asked a question, and I answered with grace." "No," Brennan said. "You answered with fog." For 1 second, the man in the charity coat looked at Brennan without performance. Then Everett turned to Lila. "My office remains open to you," he said gently. "When you're ready to stop running, I'll help you do what's right." Lila's voice came out small but clear. "My parents did what was right." Everett's eyes flickered. Atlas took one slow step forward. Everett stepped back first. He recovered quickly, turning to the volunteers, giving another soft smile, touching another shoulder. The crowd loosened around him, but not fully. Brennan had not broken the spell. Not yet. But he had made one crack. Lila breathed as if she had been underwater. "You shouldn't have said that," she whispered. "Which part?" "All of it." "Probably. That was dangerous." Brennan looked at Everett across the square. "So is letting a liar choose the language." They moved toward the church tables, not because Brennan wanted soup or scarves, but because leaving too quickly would look like fear. Atlas stayed close to Lila's left side. An old woman sat near a stack of folded blankets, tying paper tags onto bundles of firewood. She was small, no more than 5 feet tall, with a curved back, silver hair pinned beneath a wool hat, and a plum-colored coat buttoned to her chin. A tiny cardinal pin rested on her collar. Her hands were thin and knotted, but they moved with stubborn purpose. She looked up when Lila passed. Then she looked at Lila's scarf. The woman's fingers stopped on the string. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Lila froze. Brennan shifted slightly, but the woman's voice held no threat. Only memory. "My mother made it," Lila said. The old woman's pale blue eyes filled so quickly that she seemed surprised by them. "Celeste," she whispered. Lila stared at her. "You knew my mother?" The woman reached out, then drew her hand back as if afraid she had lost the right. "Miriam Doe," she said. "I live on Briar Lane. Your mother brought me medicine during the ice storm 3 winters ago, walked half a mile because the road was blocked. She wore that same green yarn around her wrist because she was still knitting it." Lila's mouth parted. Miriam looked down, ashamed now. "I heard what they said after the fire. I believed too much of it," the words trembled. Then the old woman did something no one in the square had done since Lila arrived. She took one of the firewood bundles and placed it carefully in Lila's arms. "For your stove," Miriam said. "Your mother would scold me if I let her girl go cold." Lila held the wood as if it weighed more than winter. Around them, people watched. Some looked away. Some did not. The small bundle of firewood did not prove anything. It did not clear Noah and Celeste Carrow. It did not stop Everett Lawn. But in that square, beneath the yellow winter hearth lights, it became the first mercy anyone had dared give Lila in public. Brennan saw her swallow hard. "Thank you," she said. Miriam nodded once, then looked toward Everett, who was now speaking near the church steps. For the first time, the old woman's face sharpened. "Your mother counted every blanket twice," Miriam said quietly. "A woman like that does not burn a warehouse through carelessness." Brennan tucked that sentence away. It had the shape of testimony. They found Harold Pike behind the old post office, where a narrow alley held 3 mail trucks and a snowblower that looked older than Brennan. Harold was 74, thin and slightly stooped, with a white mustache, wind-reddened cheeks, and the wary eyes of a man who had delivered too many letters carrying bad news. He wore an old navy postal coat, fingerless gloves, and a grey knit cap pulled low over sparse white hair. A worn leather mailbag hung across his chest. When he saw Lila, he stopped sorting envelopes. "Oh, Lord," he said softly. "You delivered something to me," Lila said. Harold looked toward Main Street. Brennan noticed the movement. "Mr. Pike," Brennan said. "No one followed us back here. That you saw." Brennan almost liked him for that. Harold rubbed his thumb over a small silver whistle hanging from his coat zipper. "Your father came to me the night before the fire. Late. Too late for regular mail." "What did he say?" Lila asked. Harold's face folded inward. He said, "Put this in her hands. Not on a porch. Not through a slot. Her hands, he had soot on one sleeve. Or maybe grease. I don't know." He kept looking over his shoulder. Was he scared? Harold took a long breath. He was trying not to be. Lila closed her eyes. Brennan asked, "Did he mention Everett?" "No. But he said if anyone asked, I hadn't seen him." Harold's voice lowered. "I should have said something after the fire." "Why didn't you?" Brennan asked. The old man's eyes flashed with pain, not anger. "Because half the people in this town have eaten from Everett's hand. My sister got a heater from his charity. My grandson's school got winter coats. You start asking questions about a man like that, folks don't ask if you're right. They ask why you're trying to take the warmth away." He looked at Lila. "I'm sorry." Lila did not absolve him. Not fully. But she nodded, and sometimes that was the first step mercy could manage. Harold glanced down the alley, then leaned closer. "There's more," he said. "Those relief trucks? They didn't only move in daylight. I saw them leave after midnight twice last month. No storm calls, no emergency notices. Just trucks rolling north with their lights low." Brennan's eyes narrowed. "Did you write down dates?" Harold hesitated. Then he reached into his mailbag and pulled out a small pocket calendar. I'm old, he said. People think old men forget everything. I let them. Brennan took the calendar. Inside, several dates were marked with tiny black dots. Not proof yet, but wait. They left town before noon. Lila held the firewood bundle from Miriam in her lap as Brennan drove. The tin box rested beneath her coat. Harold's calendar lay in Brennan's jacket pocket like a coal that had not yet decided whether to warm or burn. For the first mile, no one spoke. Then Atlas lifted his head from the back seat. His ears rose. Brennan checked the rearview mirror. A dark vehicle kept its distance behind them. Not close enough to accuse. Not far enough to dismiss. Lila noticed Brennan's eyes. What is it? Maybe nothing. You don't believe in maybe. No. The road curved between walls of spruce. Snow brightened the branches. For a moment, the following vehicle disappeared behind a bend. Then it was there again. Atlas stood in the back seat, body rigid, eyes fixed through the rear glass. Brennan kept both hands on the wheel and did not speed up. Fear wanted movement. Training preferred patience. At the next fork, he turned toward the cabin road. The dark vehicle slowed, waited, and then continued straight into the trees, vanishing beyond a curtain of falling snow. Lila let out a breath she had been holding. Brennan did not. He drove the last stretch in silence. When the cabin appeared through the pines, smoke still curling from its chimney, it no longer looked like an empty refuge. It looked like a place someone might come looking. Atlas remained standing until Brennan parked. Only then did the dog sit, one ear still angled toward the road behind them. Brennan looked at Lila. Everett knows you're not alone now. She held the bundle of firewood tighter. And that makes him angry? Brennan watched the empty road through the mirror. No, he said. It makes him careful. Outside, snow kept falling over the tire tracks, doing its best to erase what had just followed them home. By dawn, Brennan Vale had already walked the cabin perimeter twice. The snow had tried to hide the night's uneasiness, but it had not done a perfect job. Near the woodpile, where the wind could not smooth the ground clean, he found a shallow print pressed into the crust. Not his boot. Not Lila's. Too narrow at the heel, too fresh to belong to the county worker who had last inspected the property. Atlas found it before Brennan did. The old German shepherd stood over the mark, nose low, body still. He did not bark. He only looked toward the trees, where spruce trunks gathered close together, like men who knew something and refused to say it. Brennan crouched, touched the edge of the print with one gloved finger, then stood. Someone came close, Lila said from the porch. She had followed him out without a coat fully buttoned, her moss-green scarf twisted at her throat. Sleep had not softened her face. If anything, the night had sharpened it. Close enough to scare, Brennan said. Not close enough to act. That makes me feel much better. It should make you feel noticed. She gave him a look. He almost smiled. Different thing. Atlas padded back toward Lila and pressed his shoulder lightly against her knee. She lowered one hand to his head without thinking. It was the first time Brennan had seen her touch the dog without asking permission from fear. That small thing mattered. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke, old boards, and coffee. Brennan spread Harold Pike's pocket calendar on the table beside the tin box, the C3 key, the torn shipping labels, and a written statement Harold had scratched out in shaky block letters before they left town. It was not much. A witness, dates, a key, a dead man's warning, a mother's markings, a dog's reaction, enough to raise questions. Not enough to win anything. Brennan knew the difference. We need someone official, he said. Lila looked at the table. The sheriff? Not yet. Why? Because if we hand this to the wrong desk, it becomes a rumor with fingerprints. She understood then. Her face tightened. Everett has friends. Most men like him do. So what do? We find someone whose job is evidence, not popularity. That was how. 2 hours later, Brennan, Lila, and Atlas stood outside the County Public Safety Annex in Ashford Bend, 15 miles south of Larchmere Falls. The building was plain brick, low and practical, with salt-stained steps and a flag snapping hard in the cold wind. It did not look heroic. Brennan liked that. Heroic buildings often made people perform. Practical buildings sometimes made them work. The woman they came to see was Pilar Gaines, County Fire Inspector. She met them in a narrow office that smelled of paper, cold coffee, and wool coats drying too slowly. Pilar was 41, compact and strong, with dark hair tied low at the back of her neck, and brown eyes that seemed trained to stop at whatever did not match. She wore a Navy investigation jacket over a black turtleneck, field pants, and boots still dusted with ash-colored mud. There was no softness in the way she stood, but no cruelty either. She looked like a woman who had spent years listening to people cry beside ruins, then still had to ask where the fuel source was. Her first glance went to Atlas. "Dog stays by the door," she said. Brennan nodded once. "He will." Atlas sat at once, as if the office belonged to him, but he had graciously agreed to respect policy. Pilar's eyes flicked to Brennan. "Military trained? Yes, yes. Yours? Always has been." That earned no smile, but perhaps 1 degree less suspicion. Pilar gestured to the chairs. "You have 15 minutes. Lila sat stiffly, tin box in her lap. Brennan remained standing. "Leela Caro has information related to the Lawn Winter Relief Fire." Pilar's face did not move much, but her eyes narrowed. "That case is not closed. It's being treated like it is. It's being treated according to what the scene gave us." Lila leaned forward. "The scene didn't give you everything." There was too much pain in her voice, too much accusation. Pilar heard it and leaned back slightly. "Miss Caro," she said, not unkindly, "grief can make a person see a pattern where there is only damage." Lila's face flushed. Brennan placed one hand, lightly, on the back of her chair. Not restraining, reminding. Lila breathed once. Then she opened the tin box. She did not pour its contents across the desk like proof in a movie. She removed each item carefully. The land papers, the C3 key, the torn labels, Noah's note, and Harold Pike's signed statement. Pilar's eyes changed as the objects appeared. Not belief. Attention. Attention was better than sympathy. Pilar picked up the note with gloved fingers. "Who wrote this?" "My father," Lila said, "and he sent it before the fire. Harold Pike delivered it to me the night before. His statement is there." Pilar read the old mailman's words slowly. Brennan watched her. He had learned long ago that some people listened with their faces and others with their hands. Pilar listened by stillness. When something mattered, she moved less. "What does C3 refer to?" she asked. "Cold Storage Room 3, Lila said. "At Lawn Winter Relief." Pilar looked up. That section was unstable after the fire. Part of it was excluded from the first interior pass. "Excluded by who?" Brennan asked. "By structural risk." "On whose assessment?" Pilar's eyes cut to him. "Careful, Mr. Vale. I am." "No, you're controlled." Different thing. For the first time that morning, Lila almost smiled. Pilar set the note down. "What are you suggesting?" "That the first investigation may have been steered away from the one room Noah Caro wanted his daughter to check." Pilar turned to the labels. "And these?" "My mother marked real relief inventory," Lila said. She thought some shipments were being switched. Switched into what? Lila hesitated. Brennan spoke before she had to. "Unknown. We are not naming what we cannot prove." Pilar looked at him a moment longer than necessary. That answer helped, he continued. "Atlas reacted to the tin box and labels. He was trained to alert on certain hazardous or controlled odors in operational environments. I am not presenting that as proof. I'm presenting it as a reason to test what these items were exposed to." Pilar's eyes went to Atlas. The dog sat by the door, calm as carved stone, his torn ear angled toward the room. The white mark on his chest rose and fell with slow breath. "You have certification records?" she asked. In storage. I can get copies. Do that? Lila's voice trembled. So you believe me? Pilar's gaze returned to her, and for the first time there was something almost gentle beneath the discipline. I believe you brought me things worth checking. That is not the same as believing the whole story. Lila looked down. Pilar added, but it is not nothing. For Lila, those 5 words seemed to weigh more than comfort. Pilar stood, crossed to a file cabinet, and pulled a thick folder marked LWR Fire Preliminary. She opened it on her desk. There were diagrams, photographs, response notes, insurance references, and inspection forms. I did the initial exterior assessment, she said. Interior access was limited. Roof collapse on the east side, ice load on the rear wall. Lawn's private contractor was already pushing for debris stabilization. Private contractor? Brennan asked. Paid by Lawn Winter Relief. Approved for safety clearing. Before your supplemental exam, Pilar did not answer right away. Instead, she turned a few pages. Some things bothered me, she said. Not enough to stop the report. Enough that I didn't sign final closure. Lila looked up quickly. Pilar tapped a photograph. The fire damage around the loading bay ran hotter than expected for textiles and canned goods. There were weight discrepancies in the inventory reports. Several relief runs were logged at odd hours, and Cold Storage 3 was listed as offline due to cooling failure 3 days before the fire. The cooling system wasn't the issue, Lila said. My father told me that room barely needed cooling for whatever it claimed was inside. Pilar wrote that down in a red field notebook with bent corners. Brennan noticed the notebook. It looked worn from snow, ash, and arguments. Pilar closed the folder. This still does not give me authority to tear up a foundation. What would? Brennan asked. A credible reason to request a supplemental inspection, a witness statement, material inconsistencies, possible contamination exposure, chain of custody on these items. You have the first 3. I may have the first 3. And the 4th. Pilar looked at the tin box. Nobody touches this again without gloves. Lila pulled her hands back as if she had done wrong. Pilar's voice softened by 1 careful inch. You didn't know. Now you do. Brennan saw Lila absorb that, not blame. Instruction. There was mercy in clean procedure, if a person knew how to hear it. When they left the annex, the sky had turned the color of dull steel. Lila carried the tin box now, inside a paper evidence bag Pilar had provided, sealed but not officially taken. Pilar had not promised victory. She had promised process. In Brennan's world, process was sometimes the only bridge between pain and truth. By late afternoon, the cabin had changed again. Not much, but enough. Lila tied back a torn curtain with twine, so the kitchen window stopped flapping in the draft. Brennan replaced 2 broken porch boards with lumber he found stacked under a tarp. Atlas lay among the sawdust like a retired foreman, watching Brennan's hammerwork with grave disappointment. You don't approve? Brennan asked him. Atlas blinked. Lila, standing in the doorway with a cup of coffee, said, I think he's concerned about your craftsmanship. I saved his life in 3 countries. He's judging the porch in this one. Brennan looked at the dog. If Atlas keeps looking at me like that, I'll have to put his name on the deed. For the first time since he had found her behind the kitchen cabinets, Lila laughed. It was small, sudden, almost startled out of her. Then she covered her mouth, as if laughter had become something she no longer owned. Brennan did not comment on it. He simply drove the next nail in straighter. That night, the wind rose. It came down from the ridge after midnight, hard enough to make the cabin walls groan. Brennan woke before he knew why. One moment, he was in the narrow bed under a wool blanket. The next, he was sitting upright, heart hammering, mouth dry, the dark room no longer a room. Wind became rotor-wash. A shutter clapped outside, and memory turned it into distant fire. His hand went to where a weapon had once been. Nothing there. He could not breathe. Then weight pressed against his chest. Atlas had climbed halfway onto the bed, front paws braced beside him, heavy body warm and real. The German shepherd pushed his broad head under Brennan's chin with quiet insistence. Not then. Here. Not there. Home. Brennan closed one shaking hand in Atlas's thick fur. Easy, he whispered, though he did not know if he meant the dog or himself. The room returned in pieces, the stove glow through the cracked door, the smell of pine smoke, the old floorboards, the wind outside not war, only weather. In the hallway, Lila stood barefoot in the dimness, one hand on the wall. Brennan saw her. She saw him. Neither spoke. Pity would have been unbearable. Questions would have been worse. So Lila only lowered her eyes and stepped back into the dark. In the morning, a mug of coffee waited beside Brennan's chair before he came fully awake. No note, no speech, just coffee. He stood there a moment, looking at it, while Atlas sat nearby with the solemn expression of a creature who had handled the night shift and expected breakfast as hazard pay. Before noon, Pilar called. Her voice came through Brennan's old phone, crisp and wind-chilled. I filed for a supplemental inspection, she said. Cold storage 3 included. Lila stood across the kitchen, frozen. Brennan put the call on speaker. Pilar continued. I used the witness statement, shipment inconsistencies, restricted access records, and potential contamination exposure. It's not a raid, it's an inspection, but it gets me back on site. When? Brennan asked. Soon. Lila gripped the back of a chair. Pilar's tone lowered. Understand something. Lorne will be notified through legal channels. If there is anything there, he may move to protect himself. Brennan looked toward the window. The forest beyond the cabin stood bright and silent. We understand, he said. Pilar paused. No, Mr. Vale, I need you to understand this part most. Do not break into that warehouse. Do not give him away to make this about you. Brennan almost smiled. You always this warm? Only with people I suspect might be useful and reckless. Fair. The call ended. For a few seconds the cabin held only the faint pop of the stove. Then Atlas rose. His head turned toward the back wall. A low growl formed in his throat. Brennan moved to the door and opened it slowly. Cold air swept in. At first he saw only snow, porch, trees, the pale line of the path. Then Atlas pushed past him and stopped near the woodpile. There, pressed into the fresh morning snow, were footprints. Not old, not blurred, fresh enough that the edges still held their shape. Someone had come close to the cabin again. This time, they had come after Pilar's call. The burned warehouse waited at the edge of Larchmere Falls, like a black tooth in the snow. By noon, the sky had lowered into a hard grey ceiling, and the wind carried the bitter promise of a storm still gathering beyond the ridge. The remains of Lorne Winter Relief stood behind yellow safety tape and temporary fencing. Twisted beams rose from the ruined structure. Sheets of warped metal hung at odd angles. Snow had settled over ash, softening the destruction without healing it. Lila Carrow stopped at the gate. For several seconds she could not move. Brennan Vale stood beside her, tan field jacket dusted with snow, gloved hands still at his sides. He did not tell her to be brave. He did not say her parents would want this. People said things like that when they needed pain to become useful faster than it could. Atlas stood close to Lila's knee, his black and gold coat bright against the burned ribs of the warehouse. The old German shepherd looked toward the ruin, then back at her. Not pulling, not pushing, just waiting. Lila swallowed. My mother used to complain this place smelled like wet cardboard and cheap coffee, she said. Brennan looked at the blackened loading bay. Still does, he said. That surprised a small breath from her. Not a laugh. Not quite. But enough to let her take the first step through the gate. Pilar Gaines was already inside the perimeter. Red field notebook in hand, Navy investigation jacket zipped to her throat. The county fire inspector looked even more severe against the snow. Dark hair tied low, brown eyes moving from the old foundation lines to the crew setting up equipment near the east wall. She had brought 2 technicians and a deputy to preserve the chain of custody. Nothing here would happen quietly. Nothing here would belong only to memory. "Mr. Vale," Pilar called. "Miss Carrow, dog stays on lead unless I say otherwise." "He will," Brennan said. Atlas sat before Brennan gave the command. Pilar's mouth almost moved toward a smile, but professionalism caught it at the door. Everett Lorne arrived 10 minutes later. He came in a black SUV, stepping out in his charcoal wool coat and cream scarf as if the snow itself had been scheduled to frame him. A clean-shaven man in a dark overcoat followed with a leather briefcase. Everett's attorney, Brennan assumed. Thin, narrow-faced, with pale hands and the expression of someone who charged by the minute and apologized only on paper. Everett looked at Lila with public sadness. "My dear," he said, "you should not have to stand here again." Lila's fingers curled around the strap of her satchel. Brennan said nothing. Pilar did. "Mr. Lorne, you and counsel may observe from behind the marked line. Any interference and I'll remove you from the site." Everett placed one hand over his heart, gentle as a sermon. "Inspector Gaines, I only want this family to be at peace." Lila's face tightened. Peace. The words sounded obscene in that place. Brennan looked at Everett and saw a man who could wrap a blade in velvet and offer it as comfort. The inspection began with measurements, photographs, and a patient review of the section once listed as Cold Storage Room 3. It had been partly buried under collapsed paneling and patched concrete. The first investigation had marked the area unstable. Now, under Pilar's authority, the technicians approached with scanners, ground-penetrating equipment, and careful hands. Lila watched from a few yards away. Her eyes kept returning to one corner where the fire had eaten a crescent-shaped mark into the wall. "That was where Mum kept a folding chair," she whispered. "She said inventory hurt her knees, but she never sat long. She'd sit for 2 minutes, then get mad at herself for resting." "Sounds familiar," Brennan said. "My dad used to tell her she fought cardboard boxes like they owed her rent." This time, the smile that crossed Lila's face was real, and it broke Brennan's heart a little because it passed so quickly. Atlas rose suddenly. His body changed before he made a sound. Brennan felt it through the lead, a controlled tension, deep and certain. The dog's ears angled forward. His nose lowered toward a section of floor near the back edge of the old, cold room. Pilar noticed. "Hold him." Brennan kept the lead short but did not pull Atlas away. The German shepherd stepped once, stopped, and stared at the patched concrete. No barking, no drama, only focus. Pilar's eyes narrowed. "Mark that section." One technician, a broad young man with a shaved head and a frost-reddened nose, placed a small flag near the floor seam. Another passed a scanner over the area. The machine gave a faint, uneven tone. Pilar crouched. "This patch is newer than the surrounding slab," she said. Everett's attorney cleared his throat. "Inspector, a post-fire stabilization patch would hardly be unusual." Pilar did not look at him. "Good thing I didn't ask if it was unusual." The technician began cutting carefully along the edge. The sound of the tool against concrete made Lila flinch. Brennan saw her sway and moved closer, but she lifted one hand. "No," she said, "I need to stand." So he let her. The concrete layer came up in pieces. Beneath it was a narrow cavity, not large, not obvious. Someone had made it with intention and covered it with enough skill to fool anyone not looking for a secret. Inside lay a rectangular insulated bag, smoke-stained and flattened by weight. Lila made a sound so small it barely escaped her. The bag was grey, with a torn zipper and a single red seam along one edge. Brennan knew better than to mention the thread. This was not evidence to him first. It was a daughter recognizing her mother's hand. "That's hers," Lila whispered. "That's my mother's." Pilar raised one palm. "Nobody touches it barehanded." The bag was photographed in place, then lifted into a clean tray. Pilar opened it slowly. every movement observed and recorded. Inside were folded papers sealed in plastic sleeves, a small notebook warped by heat but still legible in places, photographs of shipment labels, copied delivery schedules, a list of families and shelters with missing supplies marked beside their names, and one small evidence packet wrapped so carefully it seemed almost prayerful. Pilar did not open the packet. She looked at it, then placed it in a separate evidence pouch. "Lab only," she said. Brennan approved of that. No spectacle, no guesses, no naming what had not yet been tested. Then Pilar found the letter. It had been folded twice and placed between two plastic sheets. The handwriting was uneven but readable, each line leaning slightly upward as though Celeste Caro had forced hope into her wrist. Pilar looked at Lila. "Do you want to read it privately?" Lila shook her head, though tears had already gathered. No. If she hid it here, she wanted it heard. Pilar handed her a copied photograph of the page, not the original. Lila held it in both hands. For a moment, the burned warehouse faded around her. There was no Everett, no lawyer, no technicians, no snow falling through the open ribs of the roof. There was only a mother's voice returning from beneath concrete. "If you read this," Lila began, and her voice broke on the first word. Brennan stood close enough for her to know he was there, far enough for the words to belong to her. She tried again. "If you read this, remember this. Your father and I never used poor people to hide sin. We have been cold, we have been hungry, but we never sold our souls for warmth." Across the ruined floor, Everett's face hardened. Lila continued, voice shaking now but growing stronger. "If we do not come home, do not let them take the truth from you too. You are not the daughter of careless people. You are the daughter of people who tried." The paper trembled in her hands. No one spoke. Even the technicians stopped moving. Atlas lowered himself beside Lila, pressing his shoulder against her leg as if the old dog had decided grief also needed a brace. Lila did not collapse. That was what Brennan would remember later. Not the letter, not the bag, not Everett's pale anger. He would remember that Lila Caro stood in the ashes of the place that had stolen her parents and did not fall. Pilar took the copy back gently and documented the letter. Everett stepped forward before his attorney could stop him. "This is emotional, but it proves nothing," he said. His voice was still smooth, but the warmth had drained from it. Pilar looked up. "You should return behind the line. That bag could have been placed there after the fire. Under a patched slab documented in your own contractor's stabilization report?" Pilar asked. Everett's mouth closed. Brennan's eyes moved to him. For the first time, Everett Lorne did not look like a saint misunderstood by cruel people. He looked like a man doing math too quickly. Pilar stood, red notebook in hand. "The contents will be logged, tested, and compared with your submitted inventory, transportation schedules, and insurance statements. My organization serves this region," Everett said sharply. "Do be careful before you damage something people depend on." Pilar's answer was quiet. "If people depend on it, Mr. Lorne, then it should survive being examined." That sentence did what Brennan's question in the town square had done. It did not defeat Everett. It cracked the air around him. The inspection ended after 3 hours. By then, the wind had thickened and snow had begun to fall harder. The evidence was sealed. The site was secured again. Lila stood outside the gate, staring back at the warehouse ruins, her face empty from too much feeling. Brennan did not rush her. Eventually, she said, "I was the daughter of people who tried. You are." "I hated them for dying," Lila whispered. Brennan said nothing. "I know that sounds terrible." "No," he said. "It sounds human." She looked at him then, and something in her expression loosened. Not healed. Never that quickly, but less alone in its ugliness. They drove back through town in late afternoon. Church bells rang somewhere ahead, heavy and dull in the storm wind. Brennan stopped near the side street behind the church, where Pilar had asked him to wait in case she needed a final signature. That was where the young man found him. He came out from behind the parish storage shed, hood pulled low, hands buried in the sleeves of a brown work jacket marked with the Lawn Winter Relief logo. He was 24 at most, thin, with narrow shoulders, ash-blonde hair sticking out from beneath a black knit cap, and a face made older by sleeplessness. His cheeks were hollow. His pale grey eyes kept dropping to the ground, as if eye contact were a debt he could not afford. "Mr. Vale?" he asked. Brennan stepped between him and Lila without thinking. Atlas, from the back seat, rose with a low rumble. The young man froze. "I'm not here to hurt anybody," he said quickly. "Name," Brennan said. "Micah." "Micah Rell." Lila's breath caught. "You worked the warehouse." Micah looked at her and seemed to shrink inside his coat. "Yes, Mom." "Don't call me that." He nodded miserably. "Right." Brennan watched him. The boy was afraid, but not in the same way Lila had been afraid. Lila had been hunted. Micah looked like a person who had helped build the cage and only now noticed the lock was on his side too. "What do you want?" Brennan asked. Micah's hands shook as he pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I changed labels," he said. "Not all. Some, I was told it was a warehouse routing thing. Then I knew it wasn't. Then my mother got sick, and Mr. Lawn said her bills could stay covered if I kept my mouth shut." Lila stared at him. Anger rose in her face so fast, Brennan thought she might strike him. Micah did not defend himself. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't pay for anything." "No," Lila said, "it doesn't." The honesty of that hit him harder than shouting would have. Micah turned to Brennan. "There's a truck tonight. Last one. He's moving what's left before the state people get here." Brennan did not ask what was in it. He did not want Micah saying too much in an open alley, and he did not want the story turning into a lesson no one should learn. "Where?" Micah swallowed. "Old Forest Road north of Stonewake Bridge. Relief truck. Looks normal from outside. Some real supplies, some not. He thinks the storm will cover the tracks." Lila's eyes went to the church, then to the white sky beyond town. "Why tell us now?" she asked. Micah's face crumpled, but he held himself upright. "I saw your mother's letter carried out of that place," he said, "and I remembered her giving my mom extra soup cans last winter. She told me not to be embarrassed because hunger was not a moral failure." His voice dropped. "I let people call her careless." No one spoke for a moment. Then Brennan took the folded paper from him. It was not proof enough by itself, only a shift schedule and a truck number. But it was something. "Micah," Brennan said, "you have two choices now. Keep being scared, or start giving back what fear helped take." The young man's eyes filled. "I don't know how. You just started." The storm arrived as they drove back to the cabin. Snow swept across the road in bright, violent sheets. The pines bowed under the wind. By the time Brennan pulled into the yard, the sky had darkened to the color of iron. Atlas jumped out first. He did not go to the door. He went to the edge of the driveway and stared into the trees. Far off, beyond the storm, the church bell tolled once, then again, its sound torn thin by the wind. Lila stood on the porch. Celeste copied words folded inside her coat. Brennan watched Atlas hold his gaze toward the forest, ears high, body rigid. The old dog looked as if he had already heard wheels turning somewhere beneath the snow. The storm reached Larchmere Falls before full dark. It did not arrive like weather. It arrived like a wall. Snow swept down from the northern ridge in thick white sheets, swallowing the tree line, the road, the porch steps, and finally the sound of the world itself. The cabin windows trembled under the wind. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied with a weak yellow hum. On the kitchen radio, a local announcer warned everyone to stay indoors unless travel was urgent. Brennan Vale stood beside the table. Harold Pike's marked dates and Micah Rell's folded schedule spread before him. Lila Caro watched his face. "You already know he's moving it tonight," she said. Brennan did not answer at once. He had called Pilar Gaines minutes earlier, giving her the truck number, the old forest road, and Micah's warning. Pilar had not wasted a word. She said she would contact the sheriff's office and emergency services, but the storm had already closed the main road out of Ashford Bend. Help would come, but help in a blizzard travelled on the storm's terms, not human ones. Then Atlas rose. The old German shepherd had been lying near the stove, muzzle on his paws, eyes half closed. Now he stood rigid, his black and gold coat lifting along the shoulders, his torn ear angled toward the forest. A low sound built in his chest, not loud, not wild, but deep enough to make the room feel smaller. Brennan looked toward the back window. Nothing but snow. Atlas took one step toward the door. "No," Brennan said softly. Atlas did not look back. Lila's hand went to the moss-green scarf at her throat. "He hears something. Or smells it. In this storm?" Brennan was already reaching for his coat. "Especially in this storm. Wind carries what men think snow can hide." Lila grabbed her own jacket. "You stay here," Brennan said. "No." His eyes turned hard. "Lila, that road cuts across the old Carrow logging land." Her voice shook, but the words did not. "My father used to plow it for neighbors after storms. Everett doesn't get to use it for this. Not one last time. This isn't about proving courage. No, it's about not spending the rest of my life as the girl who hid while everyone else carried my parents' truth." For a moment, the storm hammered the cabin roof so hard it sounded like applause from the dead. Brennan looked at her and saw the girl from the kitchen floor, knife in hand, fear sharpened into a blade. But he also saw someone else now. A daughter who had read her mother's last words in the ashes and had not fallen. He handed her a coil of rope. "Then you listen exactly." She nodded. Atlas was already at the door. They drove out with the headlights cutting only a few yards into the storm. The pickup crawled along the cabin track, tires grinding through snow, wipers slapping uselessly against the white. Atlas stood in the back seat, body braced, eyes fixed through the windshield as if the road existed more clearly to him than to the humans. Brennan did not follow a map. He followed the dog. At each fork, Atlas shifted before the turn. Left near the split spruce, right where the old logging trail dipped. Straight where the wind erased the tracks. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt like trusting a memory older than roads. Inside the cab, Lila held the rope coil against her chest. "Are we too late?" she asked. "Don't spend fear before it earns its keep. That's supposed to comfort me?" "No. It's supposed to keep you useful." She gave a short, breathless laugh, the kind people made when terror needed somewhere to go. A mile north of Stonewake Bridge, the truck's headlights found broken snow. Deep tire marks cut across the road and veered toward the trees. Atlas barked once. Brennan stopped. Through the blowing white, something large loomed below the roadside. A box truck tilted near the ditch, its rear wheels half buried, its front end dropped toward the frozen riverbank. Along the side, partly masked by snow and mud, the words were still visible. "Lawn winter relief. Warmth for every home." One rear door had burst open. Several boxes lay scattered in the snow. Some had split, spilling blankets, canned goods, and children's winter socks across the ground. Other boxes remained sealed, their labels too clean, too careful. From inside, the cab came a pounding sound. Then a voice. "Help! Micah!" Lila moved forward, but Brennan caught her sleeve. Slow. Ice shelf near the bridge. Ditch drops hard. Atlas was already pulling toward the truck, but he did not rush the cab. Instead, he veered toward a cluster of fallen boxes, sniffed once, then backed away with a sharp, disgusted snort. He turned to Brennan, eyes bright. Brennan understood. Not all the boxes were what they claimed to be. Then he saw something half buried near the open rear door, a small red mitten. For one suspended second, none of them moved. Lila bent and picked it up with trembling fingers. It was handmade, child-sized, the thumb patched with yellow thread. A tag still dangled from the wrist. For the East Hollow shelter. The storm roared around them, but that mitten made a silence of its own. Lila looked at the truck, then at the boxes, then down at the mitten in her palm. "He put this beside it," she whispered. "Real gifts, real children, right beside whatever he was hiding." Brennan saw her face change. Anger did not leave her. It became cleaner. This was no longer only about her parents. It was about every person who had stood in line for warmth while Everett used their need as camouflage. A groan came from the truck cab. Brennan snapped back into motion. "Rope around that pine," he told Lila. "Low on the trunk. 2 wraps. Keep your gloves on. Atlas, hold." The German shepherd seized the loose line in his jaws and braced his legs in the snow, not pulling yet, waiting for command. Lila ran to the tree, slipped once, caught herself, and looped the rope with hands that shook but did not fail. Brennan tied the other end around his waist and moved toward the truck. The snow crust near the ditch gave under his boots. He lowered his center of gravity, testing each step before trusting it. The truck groaned again as metal shifted against ice. Inside the cab, Micah Rell was pinned behind the wheel, blood on his forehead, eyes wide with panic. Everett Lawn was in the passenger seat, one leg trapped beneath the crumpled dash. His cream scarf was gone. His perfect hair hung damp over his forehead. Without the church lights and admiring crowd, he looked smaller, not humble, just stripped. "Vale!" Everett shouted. "Get me out!" Brennan reached the driver's side first. Micah saw him and began to cry. "I didn't want to drive. He made me. He said if I didn't." "Breathe later," Brennan said. "Move your left hand." "I can't." "You can," slowly. Behind him, Lila held the rope at the pine, Atlas planted beside her like an anchor of muscle and will. The dog's paws dug into the snow. The white mark on his chest flashed whenever the emergency lights from Brennan's truck swept over him. Brennan freed Micah's coat from a twisted bracket, then pulled the young man through the broken side window. Micah cried out once, but Brennan got him clear and dragged him back from the cab. "Leela," Brennan called. She and Atlas leaned into the rope. Micah slid across the snow toward them, coughing and sobbing. Lila grabbed his sleeve and pulled him the last few feet. "I'm sorry," Micah gasped, looking up at her. "I'm so sorry." Lila's face was pale, wet with snow. She looked at him for one hard second. "Stay alive," she said. "Then say it where everyone can hear." Brennan had already turned back. Everett stared at him through the broken windshield. For the first time since Brennan had met him, Everett did not speak like a man writing his own biography. He spoke like a man who had found the bottom of his charm and discovered nothing beneath it. "You can't leave me here." Brennan paused at the edge of the ditch. He could have waited. He could have told himself the man had earned the cold. He could have let justice arrive with a body bag and 100 unanswered questions. There was a dark part of every wounded man that understood the temptation of doing nothing. But Brennan had not survived war to let another man's evil choose the shape of his soul. "I'm not leaving you," he said. "But you're going to stop reaching for that bag." Everett's hand froze. A black document satchel lay wedged beside his knee. Brennan's eyes hardened. "Hands where I can see them." Everett obeyed, not because he respected Brennan, because he was afraid. The rescue was uglier the second time. The cab shifted. Ice cracked somewhere below the truck. Brennan jammed one boot against the frame, cut away a torn strap, and pulled Everett free by the shoulders while Atlas and Lila held the rope from the ridge. Everett screamed when his trapped leg came loose. Brennan dragged him through snow and broken glass, then shoved him clear of the ditch just as the truck settled another foot with a deep metallic groan. In the distance, sirens began to rise. Faint at first. Then closer. Pilar Gaines arrived with 2 county deputies and a rescue crew, their lights staining the blizzard red and blue. One deputy, a broad woman named Marla Keene, with a square face, dark skin and calm, tired eyes, moved quickly to secure Everett. She had the steady manner of someone who had seen too many people lie in bad weather and had stopped being impressed by volume. Pilar went straight to Brennan. "You all right? Busy. I can see that." Atlas pulled free from Lila suddenly and ran toward the scattered boxes. "Atlas!" Brennan called. But the dog did not go far. He stopped beside 3 sealed cartons, half covered in snow, then sat. Pilar followed his line of sight. She looked at the labels, then at the truck number, then back toward the road. "Mark those," she told a deputy. Everett, wrapped in a rescue blanket near the ambulance, lifted his head. "This is unlawful. Those are relief supplies." Pilar turned to him. "Then, you should be very eager for us to confirm that." Everett looked away. The satchel from the cab was recovered. Everett's phone was taken into evidence. The truck was secured. The boxes Atlas had marked were photographed where they lay and left unopened until proper handling could begin. No spectacle, no guesses. Only the machinery of truth beginning to turn. As the rescue crew loaded Micah into an ambulance, Lila stepped close to him. He looked up, face bruised, eyes full of shame. "My mother gave yours soup," Lila said. Micah nodded, crying silently. "Then, live long enough to tell the truth for both of them." He nodded again. Everett was placed in the back of a deputy vehicle, wrists secured, his wool coat soaked, his charity pin missing from his lapel. No church steps, no photographers, no warm applause from grateful citizens, only storm, mud, flashing lights, and an old German shepherd watching him with the stillness of judgment. When the tow rig finally pulled the truck from the ditch, snow and dirt smeared the slogan on its side, "Warmth for every home." Half the words disappeared beneath mud. Lila stood beside Brennan, the small red mitten still in her hand. "He used warmth to carry the coldest thing," she said. Brennan looked at the truck, then at Atlas, who stood in the falling snow with silver on his muzzle and truth in his bones. "Then we give the warmth back," he said, "to the people it was stolen from." By morning, the storm had spent itself. Larchmere Falls woke beneath a silence so clean it almost felt undeserved. Snow lay high against the church steps, along the roofs, over the branches of the spruce trees, and across the road, where Everett Lawn's relief truck had been dragged from the ditch the night before. The town looked peaceful again, but peace was no longer the same thing as innocence. By noon, the truth had begun moving faster than rumor. Lawn winter relief was no longer spoken of as a blessing. County deputies sealed the warehouse office. Pilar Gaines and her team took custody of shipment logs, insurance records, phone records, and the evidence recovered from Celeste Caro's hidden bag. Micah Rell gave his first formal statement from a hospital bed. His face bruised, his voice shaking, but his memory clear enough to hurt. Harold Pike turned over his pocket calendar. Miriam Doe told the church board what she remembered about Celeste, and Lila Caro, who had once crouched behind a kitchen cabinet with a knife in her hand, sat across from Pilar Gaines and signed her own statement without looking away. Everett Lawn was charged within days. The list was long enough to make the town quiet. Using relief operations as cover for illegal shipments, intimidating witnesses, concealing evidence, insurance fraud, and acts connected to the deaths of Noah and Celeste Caro. No one had to describe the hidden goods in detail. The shame was not in the object alone. The shame was in the disguise. He had used blankets, soup cans, heaters, church basements, and the trust of old people to move darkness through winter. When Everett was brought past the front of the church after a closed hearing, no one cheered. That was what Brennan Vale noticed. The square was full, but not noisy. People stood in coats and scarves beneath the pale afternoon sun. The volunteers, who had once smiled beside Everett's trucks, now stared at the snow. A few women crossed themselves. One old man removed his cap. The bakery woman who had muttered against Lila days earlier would not raise her eyes. Everett came down the steps in a dark coat, without his cream scarf, wrists secured in front of him. His silver-blonde hair had lost its polished shape. He did not look monstrous. That almost made it worse. He looked ordinary enough to remind everyone that evil did not always arrive snarling. Sometimes it came carrying a donation box. His eyes found Brennan first. Then Lila. For one brief second, he seemed ready to speak. Perhaps to explain. Perhaps to accuse. Perhaps to offer one last gentle lie to a town that had once leaned toward him like cold hands toward a stove. But Atlas stepped beside Lila. The old German shepherd did not bark. He only stood there, black and gold coat bright against the snow, torn ear forward, silvered muzzle still. Everett looked away first. The deputy guided him into the waiting vehicle. The door shut. No applause followed. Only the sound of an engine turning over in the cold. Lila stood very still. Brennan stood beside her, hands in the pockets of his faded tan jacket. "Does it feel over?" he asked. "No," she said. "It feels like everyone just noticed the smoke." He nodded. Some fires ended quickly. Others kept burning inside people long after the roof collapsed. 3 days later, the town held a memorial for Noah and Celeste Caro. It was not large, and that made it better. A table was placed before the church, covered with a white cloth that moved gently in the wind. On it sat the tin box Noah had sent his daughter, the C3 key, a sealed copy of Celeste's notebook, and a framed photograph of Noah and Celeste standing together in front of their old porch. Noah looked broad and shy. In the picture, one hand resting on a railing he had probably repaired himself. Celeste stood beside him, small and bright-eyed, with red-brown hair pulled back and a smile that looked like it had survived work, worry, and weather. A small wooden sign stood before the photograph. They did not die from carelessness. They died because they refused to let goodness become a mask for evil. Lila read the words once, then again. Her chin trembled, but she did not cry. Miriam Doe approached slowly, leaning on a cane carved from dark maple. Her plum-colored coat was buttoned tight, and the little cardinal pin on her collar caught a spark of winter sun. She looked smaller than she had in the town square, as if apology had weight, and she had been carrying it for days. She stopped in front of Lila. For a moment, the old widow only held out both hands. Lila took them. "Your mother brought me wood when no one remembered I was cold," Miriam said. Her voice cracked, but she did not look away. "I let people tell me she was careless because it was easier than doubting a man who kept the church basement warm." Lila's eyes filled. Miriam pressed her thin fingers around Lila's hands. "I forgot what real kindness looked like," she whispered. "I am sorry. No speech could have done more." Around them, people bowed their heads. Not because the preacher had asked them to, but because shame had finally found a holy use. Then Miriam removed the cardinal pin from her coat and laid it beside Celeste's photograph. "She fixed this for me once," she said. "Told me even old birds deserved bright feathers." Lila laughed through her tears. That tiny laugh moved through the gathered crowd more powerfully than any accusation. It did not forgive everyone. It did not erase what had been said. But it proved something had survived the fire besides evidence. It proved Celeste was still making the world warmer. Micah Rell came forward near the end. His forehead was bandaged, one arm held close to his side. He looked painfully young, standing before the town in a borrowed coat. His ash-blonde hair flattened, his pale eyes red from more than the cold. No one clapped for him. No one should have. He had helped with wrong things. He had been afraid. He had chosen silence when silence fed the machine. But he had also chosen to speak before the machine swallowed everything. "I can't undo what I did," Micah said, voice shaking into the microphone. "I let Mr. Lawn scare me. I let my mother's sickness become my excuse." Noah and Celeste Caro were not careless. They were trying to stop us. He looked at Lila. "I'm sorry I made them stand alone." Lila did not move toward him. She did not embrace him. Forgiveness, Brennan thought, should never be demanded on schedule. But she nodded once Micah began to cry. After the memorial, Brennan found Lila behind the church, looking toward the road that led to her family's land. "What now?" he asked. She wiped her cheeks with the back of one hand. "I keep it. The land? All of it. Everett wanted it because it gave him cover. I want it because my parents left me a way back." Over the next weeks, Winter loosened one finger at a time. The investigation continued. Lawyers came and went. State agents took statements. Pilar remained as blunt as a hammer and twice as useful. Harold Pike became strangely famous for his pocket calendar and hated every minute of it. Miriam began volunteering at the New Relief Committee, though she complained loudly about the quality of donated soup. Lila did not leave town. Instead, she stood in the old Caro property office with a clipboard and opened every box herself. The New Relief program was small at first. Transparent, unimpressive in the way honest things often were. Every shipment was logged by hand and online. Every family had a name, not a number. Every volunteer signed beside the boxes they packed. Nothing moved at midnight. Nothing needed a saint's photograph to make it believable. Brennan helped repair shelves. Pilar helped design safety checks. Harold delivered notices. Miriam tied tags on firewood bundles with the severity of a queen inspecting soldiers. Atlas watched all of it from the doorway, occasionally stealing a dropped biscuit and pretending age had made him innocent. The cabin changed too. Brennan had meant to leave after the worst was done. He told himself that every morning, while replacing window seals, fixing the porch, stacking wood, and clearing the creek path. He told himself it was temporary, while he hung extra blankets near the stove. He told himself it was not a home, while Atlas fell asleep beside the hearth, as if the decision had already been made. Then one afternoon, Leela arrived carrying a carved wooden sign. She had made it from a piece of old cedar found behind Elias Morrow's shed. The letters were uneven, hand-cut, and somehow perfect. The Atlas Hearth. Brennan stared at it for a long time. "You named my cabin after my dog." Lila lifted her eyebrows. "Your dog found me. Your dog judged your porch repairs. Your dog has better instincts than half the county." Atlas, lying in the doorway, thumped his tail once. "See," Lila said. "He approves." Brennan looked at the sign again. Something in his chest, long frozen and disciplined, shifted in a way that hurt before it warmed. "I bought this place to disappear," he said. "I know. That sign looks like the opposite of disappearing." "It is," he should have argued. Instead, he took the sign from her and nailed it above the cabin door before sunset. By late winter, people began stopping there. A veteran whose truck slid into a ditch during a squall. An elderly couple who needed help getting firewood stacked. A boy who found a stray hound shivering near the creek. Brennan never advertised. Lila never called it a shelter. But the kettle was almost always hot, and Atlas had a way of standing on the porch like a gatekeeper from some old legend, deciding who needed warmth before anyone asked. Brennan still woke some nights with the past in his lungs. But now, when the wind hit the walls, he could hear other things too. Atlas breathing by the stove, Lila laughing outside as she argued with a stuck crate, Miriam complaining about weak coffee, Harold's mail truck rattling up the road like a stubborn beetle. Pain had not left. It had simply lost ownership. At the first thaw, sunlight came down over Larchmere Falls, like a blessing that did not need to announce itself. Snow slipped from the cabin roof. The creek began to speak again beneath its ice. Children passed on sleds, dragging empty crates toward the New Relief office, where real blankets, real coats, real food, and real names waited. Atlas lay before the stove, silver muzzle resting on his paws, amber eyes half closed. Brennan stood beside the window, watching smoke rise from the chimney into the brightening sky. "Looks like this place cost more than $20, he said. Lila, sorting tags at the table, looked over. How much did it cost? Brennan thought of the tin box, the key, the burned warehouse, the storm, the mitten in the snow, and a mother's letter pulled from beneath concrete. He thought of a town learning the difference between charity and goodness. Then he looked at Atlas. "The truth," he said, "and the people who wouldn't let evil wear the coat of kindness." Atlas thumped his tail once, slow and satisfied. For the first time in years, Brennan did not look at the forest and see a place to vanish. He saw wood for the fire. He saw tracks leading home. And the small cabin at the edge of the pines no longer seemed like a hiding place for a tired soldier. It seemed like a flame. Small, yes, but warm enough to call the lost back from the snow. Sometimes the greatest evil does not come wearing a frightening face. Sometimes it comes dressed in kindness. It speaks softly. It shakes hands in public. It gives just enough to be praised while quietly taking from those who have the least. Everett Lawn built his power by pretending to serve the poor. He used warm coats, blankets, soup cans, and charity boxes to hide something cold and corrupt. But no lie, no matter how carefully wrapped, can stay buried forever when God has already planted truth in the hands of ordinary people. A father's tin box, a mother's hidden letter, a frightened daughter who refused to sign away her family's name, a tired old soldier who thought he was only buying a cabin, and a loyal German shepherd who sensed what human eyes had missed. That is the quiet miracle of this story. God did not send thunder from the sky. He did not split the mountains open. He did not stop the fire before it came. Instead, he worked through small things: a key marked C3, a red thread, an old mailman's memory, a young man's guilty conscience, and a dog who would not ignore the scent of truth. In our own lives, we may not face a burned warehouse or a hidden crime, but many of us know what it feels like to be misunderstood. Many of us know what it feels like when people believe the lie faster than they believe the wounded. Many of us have stood in seasons where the truth seemed buried beneath ash, snow, fear, or silence. This story reminds us that God sees what people overlook. He sees the parent who sacrifices quietly. He sees the lonely veteran who still has love left to give. He sees the young person trapped by fear, waiting for one chance to do the right thing. He sees the widow who made a mistake, then found the courage to apologize. He sees the daughter who kept walking even when the whole town turned away. And he sees you too. Maybe you are walking through your own winter right now. Maybe you are carrying a truth no one understands. Maybe you feel tired, falsely judged, forgotten, or afraid to begin again. But remember this: God can use the smallest door to lead you into a new life. A cabin bought for $20 can become a hearth. A broken heart can become a place of shelter. A painful past can become a fire that warms others. Brennan came to that cabin to disappear, but God gave him a reason to stay. Lila came there to hide, but God gave her the courage to stand. Atlas was only following instinct, but through that loyal heart, lives were changed. That is often how grace works. Quietly, patiently, through ordinary hands, through honest courage, through someone choosing not to let evil wear the coat of kindness. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Your words may encourage someone else who is going through a hard season. And if you believe stories of courage, loyalty, faith, and redemption still matter, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you more stories like this. May God bless you and your family. May He protect your home, strengthen your heart, and guide your steps through every storm. May He comfort those who are grieving, provide for those who are struggling, and surround every lonely soul with the right people at the right time. And may you always remember this: even in the coldest winter, God can still light a small fire strong enough to call the lost back home.